Sorry that you had to do something today.
Okay, cool. Looks good.
Welcome to Get Justice with Scott Smith and Michael Morris. Good morning again, Michael.
Good morning, buddy. Good to see you.
Good to see you on this cold day.
Yeah, today it's not as bad as it was, but for January, this is going to be the weirdest weather week ever. It's going to be 1 degree, and then it's going to go up to 55, and then it's going to be a blizzard again. So it's Ohio.
Yeah, welcome to Ohio. Well, another thing about Ohio that you're welcome to, it's one of the worst hit opioid crisis states in the union.
Yeah, we did touch on this a little bit last week, and I think it was our first show after the new year, but I like to do my research, and I thought this was such a hot topic. The one thing we didn't talk about is why you had brought that up, because early on last year about that there were some cases that were going to be brought in Ohio against these drug distribution centers.
Big pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
Big pharma.
Yeah, yeah. So can you kind of touch on why you had an interest in that? Not opioids itself, but the epidemic.
I have an interest for a lot of reasons, like a lot of people probably listening today have reasons because they know somebody who's been affected, someone who's become addicted to these painkillers and then maybe moved on to something worse. Big pharma for their distribution of these pain pills. Do you know why?
I'm not going to guess. I would like you to tell people why.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Big Pharma is one of the most powerful lobbying groups in D.C., which means they have a lot of control over a lot of things that goes on in terms of writing laws and the regulatory agencies like the FDA, whether their drugs are approved or not approved, and how long their patents are, so they can make more money. It's always about more money. It's like insurance companies. Big Pharma is no different. How can we make more money? I digress. What we're talking about here is Big Pharma and their lobbyists making it easier for them to put drugs on the market. One thing about the opioid drugs, Michael, is this. When it first came out, the studies they revealed or attempted to demonstrate was that the opioids, Oxycontins, Oxycodines, Vicodin, things of that nature, opium derivative-based drugs, synthetic or real, were not addictive.
Right, and that study was done in 2010, that they were not addictive.
Way before that.
The one that was covered most recently on 60 Minutes, when they were talking about it was that 2010 testimony that they couldn't find a direct correlation. So that's why for the next 6 years, McKesson and Cardinal and all these people were able to put this stuff out. But that's why I'm curious about the epidemic being so big to this point. I know there's not a clear-cut answer, but what can somebody do if you're an attorney, what can you do to help these people that are in this situation?
Well, let's back up and let me just finish this history because it may be helpful. Well, it turns out the opioids are addictive and very, very addictive. So what first seemed like a good defense to pain was the prescription of these painkillers, these opioids, turned out to be a bane. Because once you got somebody hooked on them, not all, but many people couldn't get off. They couldn't get off the drugs. So it caused them to want more. And if they were past the time of their healing or when the pain should have subsided from the injury or condition, they still wanted the drug. Well, that created pill mills. And then you had doctors who were not scrupulous who opened the pill mills and just started writing prescriptions for pill after pill after pill. There were lines out the doors. Back about the time you're talking about, the early 2000s, in these pill mills were people that were addicted who originally got on the medication legitimately and were on it legitimately for legitimate reasons.
For pain relief.
For pain relief from injuries, from surgeries, things of that nature during the healing process. Well, once that phase passed, they became addicted. They still needed the drugs, so they went back. So the pill mills started, and it put everybody in a bad position because the pill mills then exacerbated the problem. So more and more people across the country became addicted. More and more people wanted the drugs. Well, the manufacturers and distributors loved it because they were throwing that stuff out left and right across the country. Our lawsuit focuses on the retailers and the distributors. One thing that we pointed out last time, Michael, was this. Distributors had the Willy Wonka golden ticket because only so many distributors were permitted this opportunity to get the drug from the retailer, or excuse me, from the manufacturer to the retailer, the pill mills. They were required by federal law to keep a lookout for and monitor suspicious orders. If you've got a small community of 500 people and you've got 100,000 doses of opioids going there, there's a problem. Not everybody in the community needs them. So what they're doing is prescribing more than what the people need. And they're probably prescribing them to people who become addicted. Well, they didn't blow the whistle on themselves. Why do you think they didn't?
Profits.
Probably profits.
You're making a ton of
Probably
revenue.
always follow the money is usually
Right.
a good way to figure this out. So what did they do? Nothing. Well, they got fined millions of dollars back in the early 2000s for doing that, for failing to do what they were supposed to do, which was monitor the number of orders. Well, their big complaint was, gee, we don't control the pharmacies, we don't control the doctors. Well, they kind of do because they're pushing these drugs and telling these doctors what a great pill they are and what a great pain relief they are.
And everybody wants them, so they're going to come back to you.
And everybody wants them. It's like tobacco used to be. Oh, these cigarettes are not addictive. When it turns out that they are. Well, this is the big scam of the century. The opioids are addictive. And they were not curtailing it. They were not monitoring it. And they didn't report it to the FDA.
Well, you brought this up. I thought this is a perfect time to put this in here. Mingo County, have you heard of that? In West Virginia?
Yeah.
Population is 25,000. 11 million pills over a 5-year period were distributed for a county of 25,000 people.
Absolutely. The lawsuits that I'm a part of, that we are filing on behalf of counties in Ohio, started originally in West Virginia, where you're talking about.
Right.
This, if you follow the Ohio River Valley from Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, that's where it's hardest hit in this country, at least in the Midwest. Yes, what you just pointed out was exactly my example. Why weren't the distributors going, wait a minute, Mingo County has only so many people in the population, but they've got all this dosage of painkillers.
Well, that's 100% of the population is getting dosed with about 200 pills a day.
Well, if you do the average, that's what it comes out to. I'm not sure of those exact numbers.
No, I'm just throwing that out there. But if you think about it, per county, how many? That's just one. That's
and we
not
know
Franklin County.
That's right.
Which is 1.8. If you include the outer belt, it's 2.3 million people. How many people were being overdosed on that?
Well, it's overprescribed.
Overprescribed.
That's the problem. The doctors weren't doing much about it, but they're not in charge of it. You can't really blame the doctors unless you've got an unscrupulous doctor who's just pushing pills to make money, the pill mills. Those were shut down. The pill mills are not a problem anymore. The problem is the big pharmacies didn't change their attitude after they were fined by the federal government. They didn't change their monitoring system. They just let the pills go out and started throwing them across the country, and the problem continued. To the point where the people who wanted the drugs couldn't afford them, couldn't get them, their doctors cut them off. So what'd they do? They turned to another opium-based drug that turned out to be much cheaper.
Well, there's your gateway drug, right? That's
and it's
the
heroin.
example of the gateway. I can't get opioids, but I can get
heroin, and I satisfy my need and my addiction, and then they overdo it, or they combine it, or there's some unscrupulous dealers, as if dealers could be scrupulous, and they take their heroin and they cut it with something else, or it's really powerful and the dosage kills them.
So when you're presenting these cases or building this case, who are you actually presenting that to? The state, or because you're trying to go against?
Well, we
pharma.
filed lawsuits already. A group of lawyers, and there's a lot of groups around the country doing this because it's being filed everywhere in the country. States are doing it. Attorney generals are doing it. We're representing counties who are doing it. We have counties in the state of Ohio that we have filed suit in behalf of against the pharmacy retailers and the pharmacy distributors because they didn't keep track of and stop or alert the FDA about it. Now, if you watch the 60 Minutes episode and you take this with a grain of salt, apparently the FDA had somebody tell them stop. The big pharmacies are too big for even the federal government to handle.
Right.
Well, that's far-fetched, but I'm not saying it's too far from the truth.
Well, you had said that when we talk about lobbyists, there are lobbyists in the insurance world, there's lobbyists in the the drug world, and $102 million was spent by major drug companies for lobbyists to go against this bill, this Marino bill. So when you're looking at that, you're thinking, how can I get you on the same level, or a group of attorneys on the same level as these lobbyists who are pushing Congress people to say, don't worry about it, don't go after it?
Well, money talks, right?
Right.
Lobbyists,
but that's what I mean.
Yeah.
They're arming the opioid industry, basically, or big pharma. They're putting up this big wall. You can't beat how much money I can throw at it, right?
Well, they're infiltrating the government. Right. If someone came in the FDA and said, no, don't pursue this anymore, you got to shake your head, because the government is in place to protect us. We're paying our taxes for them to protect us from people like Big Pharma. Well, when your reach is so big and corruption is so high, if that's what it is, and someone went into the FDA who has control and power and said, stop the investigation, we can't take them on, you have to look real hard at that, because it doesn't sound right. It didn't sit well with me. Does it sit well with you to hear that?
No. Well, you brought up the fact that if you've seen somebody that's been addicted to these painkillers, these opioids, you really watch their life spiral down. You can't do anything about it. You can try to take them to rehab. You can try to counsel them, all that. It doesn't matter. They're hooked. And once they're hooked, you can't get them off of it. And you're watching somebody drag their whole family down. I mean, I personally watched it with one family member in particular where, I mean, he was stealing. He was stealing from us. He was stealing from his parents.
Sure.
And it got to the point where everyone just threw their hands up. So where did he go? To like-minded individuals where they were stealing. They were getting jobs at restaurants to steal money at the end of the night. They would get fired, but they don't keep you in jail for that long for it, right? It's just kind of like a minor offense, and they put you back on the street.
It isn't. The money that you and I pay for our taxes, a lot of that's now going to law enforcement, drug courts, should go to secondary education to teach our younger people to stay away from this kind of thing. The problem is addiction a crime? We've been treating people who do exactly what you said, steal, well, that's a crime, obviously, because they're addicted. Now, is the addiction a crime? Is everybody sitting back who's not addicted, like you and me, and go, well, geez, I would never do that. I never take that pill. I never get addicted. Well, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. We're talking about people that are addicted that were just like us, that had an injury or a surgery that became addicted.
Right.
Okay?
So it was handed to you for pain relief to help you, but then it was too strong and you couldn't kick it.
Or you have a constitution that couldn't kick it, right? Or became addicted, where maybe you and I wouldn't be, somebody else would.
Right.
It depends on the people. I don't think everybody is affected the same by drugs. I know a lot of people who have had surgery recently, and they go, look, they gave me these opioids. They gave me the painkillers. I didn't want to take them.
That's the part that I still don't understand. They're still prescribing these very addictive drugs. I get that they're trying to do a benefit to you. But if it's something that you might not be able to kick and get rid of, it just seems like it's almost, I don't know, you're handing me a gun and just don't point it at your head.
Well, it's like anything that is legal. It's got to be monitored. The doctor's got to know what they're doing when they prescribe the medication. Make sure they don't overprescribe it. Only give a little dose. See how the person reacts. Maybe step them down from that, down to like ibuprofen.
Right.
Some people can handle the pain, some people can't. Everybody's got a different pain tolerance. So, a lot of it is left on the shoulders of the doctors who prescribe it. But if you want to go to the core of the problem, you have to go to the manufacturers. You got to go to the distributors who are throwing this stuff out like candy.
When there's 3 major manufacturers here, and they're all in the Midwest, from what I've seen.
Well, they're major players. McKesson, I think, is in San Francisco. You got Cardinal Health here, and you've got Purdue, but there's a lot of them out there. Purdue started this thing out in California. Purdue's the one that's original owner is the one that came up with this letter that said these opioids are not addictive. And that's one reason, at least, that's being argued that necessarily it got approved when it probably shouldn't have been approved.
Right.
If it's addictive, you have to put different constraints on it.
But also is, who said it's not addictive? When you do the study of it, I understand
there's a famous letter.
Right. I get that, but I'm saying the population that's going to say, if they're listening, they're going to say, well, a doctor must have said that. But whose doctor?
Well, they do clinical studies. Like any drug has to go through several step process to be approved by the FDA. Well, who's running the FDA? Right. Who's in charge of the FDA? Right. Are they being influenced by Big Pharma? Right. Well, we all know how that works.
Right. We need to take a break right here, but we're going to get back into the opioid discussion. You're listening to Get Justice with Scott Elliot Smith. As far as the case, so can we kind of give a breakdown of what the expectation is for the cases being brought? Because if they're being brought by counties,
sure.
Because I think people are going to think, oh, that's going to be, you're going to present it within 30 days. I think a lot of people don't understand how court works.
Break it down. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The legal system, how it works.
Yeah. Sure. Because you need to get on the docket, you need to be heard, and then there can be a judgment, and then they can say, oh, but hold up. You know, like not the reversal in the truck case. What did you have? They appealed it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, they filed
so you could win. And they can appeal it, and it could still be 2 or 3 years away.
Oh, so it could be a long term.
I'd like you to break down.
Yeah, that's fine. We can do that.
All right. Oh, yeah, it'll be appealed.
Who's bringing us back?
You bring us back.
Ready?
Yep. Welcome back to Get Justice with Scott Smith and Michael Morris. Michael, during the break, I think you had some questions about how does the legal system work?
Yeah, in the show, we've talked a lot about what you need to do to prepare yourself in the case you might have to go to court. But I don't think people understand, you and I have talked about it off the air, what actually happens when you're going to court. So what I want people to understand is you're bringing these cases by county to trial. Break down how that works from the start to the end, because I think people think you're going to be in court and within a month it's going to be over. You know, we all watch the courtroom dramas on TV. It's over within a week or 2 weeks. That's not how this is going to work.
No, This is going to be a long, drawn-out process. And because it's across the country, people are filing suits, counties, states, everywhere people are filing. They're lining up to file. Cities are filing, counties are filing, states are filing. Our Attorney General filed a lawsuit against Big Pharma. What's going to happen is most likely, and it hasn't been all worked out yet, but right now, the cases potentially are going to get all put into one court, and right now there's a court in Cleveland, a federal court in Cleveland, where a judge has been assigned, who will bring all the cases across the country into one courtroom to be handled by one judge. And what happens in those situations is people file lawsuits, groups file lawsuits, counties, states file lawsuits. If they're all brought into, under this federal jurisdiction, it's called a multi-district litigation. So all the districts where suits have been filed are going to be brought into one location. Now, without going into all the details, let's assume it's all now centralized, and one judge is going to handle it. Well, what happens next is a lot of committees are formed in behalf of all the plaintiffs, the plaintiffs being the people who brought the lawsuits, the states, the counties, or the cities. And it is by committee that everything is done. And you report back to the court. For instance, the first thing they're going to do is committees for discovery. What things do we need to represent the plaintiffs to get the proof we need to show what it is we claim the Big Pharma has done wrong? Now, the Big Pharma is going to have its army of lawyers defending it. They're going to try to slow down this train. They're going to try to stop this train. They're going to follow every motion in the book to keep it from getting forward, to getting it towards resolution. If it's like tobacco litigation, which is similar to this, but smaller, the same type of thing happened. They have a multi-district litigation. All the cases across the country go to one court, necessarily in federal court here, and then they're all subject to what this court does. So instead of everybody doing the same thing and repeating the efforts and getting the same experts and doing everything across the board, it's all now centralized in one place. So that's going to take years to get the information, with the objective of trying to resolve the issue, to work out a deal so you can help the communities, put the money back in the communities who have had to create drug courts, who've had to put 30-40% of law enforcement on drug-related crimes, and secondary education to teach the community about the problem. And finally, rehabilitation. These people that are addicted necessarily are not just bad people. In most instances, they're not bad people.
They're just in a bad way.
They're in a bad way. Well, they need help. Throwing them in jail doesn't help. They're still addicted. When they get out of jail, they're going back to the drug. What they need is treatment. So there's more money there. So think about the billions and billions of dollars that's necessary to undo what Big Pharma has done. That's really the objective.
Well, in the meantime, they're still making more revenue, right?
Oh, sure.
So they're able to fund.
Sure.
I mean, we talked about the penalty or the fine they had to pay in that 60 Minutes piece, and it was, 2 to 3 hours worth of profit.
Yeah.
It was nothing. It was less than 1%. Here you go.
It's your pocket change.
But the guy that was on this show that was heading up this Marino bill, he was the one that said this makes the crack epidemic look like nothing.
Right.
Because crack you had to make yourself, or you had to find someone that could do it. You literally could get a script and you're hooked.
Legitimately.
And then it led to, if you couldn't get the scripts anymore, it led to straight heroin.
Yeah, and that's where we are. And then people doing the heroin die too. So the overdose you're seeing now probably, and I haven't seen the statistics lately, are probably more related to like a heroin. You can get $5 worth of heroin to make you happy. It may cost you, $30 a pill on, not by prescription, but on the street.
I think they said it was like $5 to $10 to get heroin on the street. Not a lot, but enough to get you your fix or whatever.
Yeah, those aren't the exact numbers. I'm not sure exactly what they are.
But you also don't know what you're getting. I mean, that's
right.
where that whole Narcan... I hadn't heard of Narcan until maybe summer of last year. I didn't realize how many cops actually have to have that because people are ODing on this stuff.
Just so everybody knows, Narcan is a drug that if someone's ODing, you can give them to keep them from ODing. I mean, that's the simplest way of describing it. It does it differently than that, more than that. But yeah, you're right.
I've talked to more firefighters that, I hate to hear the stories of them, burning building, there's a family, and they're not telling me those stories anymore. It's this Narcan thing. They're going to the same places multiple times in a week making runs for that, to distribute this Narcan.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all because this epidemic, it's all connected. So it's connected from opioids to heroin to black tar heroin to Narcan. But it started with Big Pharma. It's
far-reaching, Michael. I mean, if you've got a family member who gets addicted to this drug, it's going to affect you just as much, and you're not addicted. You don't take the drug. They're going to steal from you. They're going to bring your life down. They're going to make you miserable, going to make you unhappy, and you're going to watch them slowly deteriorate. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to try to get them help. Well, can you afford it? With our lovely health insurance it is right now, can you get that person into the care that they need and afford it? Because no matter what you pay, you're going to have a huge deductible, huge copay. That's if you can afford the insurance in the first place.
Right. So where do you think, if you were, when this case actually finally goes to trial, I mean, we're probably a couple years away from that.
More than that.
So you're a youngish guy. I mean, you want to be there when this happens, right? I mean, so yeah. You're plotting ahead. You're doing your everyday activities, but you still have to do research and prepare for this. Like, this trial could happen in a couple months, but the amount of detail you're going to put together, it's going to be, I can't wait to actually see what it looks like.
The organizational charts that will be created for who does what on both sides of this case are going to be huge. A lot of people want to complain that, plaintiffs' lawyers, people like me, are just in it to make the money. This is kind of the biggest bullcrap kind of statement I've ever heard. Because what it does, and what I'm telling you, what we want to have happen, is to help the community. Put the money back in the pockets of the counties, of the cities, who are spending all of our tax money on drug courts, law enforcement, rehabilitation, and education. It's what we have to do. What I see as a problem is that 60 Minutes touched on it. Where's our government help? Where's Congress's help? It's ridiculous to me that we have to do this privately. You wouldn't need me if the government would take care of this. They have control over Big Pharma. They have control over the regulatory agencies, FDA. And if that 60 Minutes piece is true, and FDA thought, these guys are too big to go after, I'm pulling out the bullcrap card on that.
Well, that was the thing that was frustrating, is that guy led an office of people to pursue these, and eventually he was in an office by himself, so he just resigned. And it was labeled as, he just quit, he didn't want to do it. There was nobody else working with him. If I don't have any tools, I can't
because resources were away.
Right. Well, again, I just thought we kind of, doing half a show on it last week, I thought was so interesting, but I like the fact that people now know there are efforts to stop this. And you're one of the people that's leading the charge to get this to court, but they just need to know this isn't going to happen overnight. It's not one case, one trial, one person. This is a multi-level program to fight this.
You're absolutely right, Michael. And one thing to take away from today is if you've got anybody that is close to you that's addicted to these opioids, get them as much help as you can. Get them off this drug. Get them back on the straight and narrow if you can. Do what you can. There are drug courts. There are rehabilitation facilities. Hopefully you've got the wherewithal to get this done.
Next week we won't talk about this, but if there are people that have questions, they can always, we're on Facebook Live doing the show. They can go on your website, send you an email. Do you want to give them that email address?
My email is sestriallaw.com. You've been listening to Get Justice with Scott Smith and Michael Morris. Thank you for listening.